This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Hello, everyone. Happy to have you with us here on A Silent War Within. Obviously, my guest, well, not my guest, but my co-host, Michaela, is on a little mini vacation in New York City. New York City is not necessarily what I would call a mini vacation, but that's what she called it. So she's not with us today, so you just got me. My voice is still recovering from a horrible sinus thing. I don't even know what it was that went around.
Yeah.
It was pretty awful. I lost my voice last week and had to reschedule a few guests, so that was always fun. But today, hopefully, the show can be carried by our guest that I'm super excited to have. Kristine, I've watched you for years. Kristine is, you guys probably know her as a social media creator and content creator. However, she's done multiple jobs within the medical field. So why don't you tell us about your story and kind of where you got started and how you got to be where you are today?
Yeah, so super excited to be here. It's not often that I get to talk about those kinds of work things with other people, which it's just nice. It's nice to talk about that, and not because at my full-time job, people are like, oh, so the content creation thing, and I'm like, no. So I don't want to talk about it. So I got started in emergency medicine at the age of 18. So I'm 32 now. So 14 years ago at this point, I was actually on my way to a friend's house, came down the stairs in my childhood home, and my mom was home from work, which was really bizarre. She always left the house at 5 a.m. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, on my way to a friend's house, Mom, I'm going to get out of here. And she didn't respond. And so I went over to the couch and discovered that she wasn't breathing. I panicked, called 911. And when EMS got there, I just froze. I didn't know what to do. The dispatcher over the phone is telling me, pull her off the couch, start CPR. And I stood there, feet glued to the floor, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And EMS shows up. They're trying to give me instructions and I'm just staring at them like, I don't know what's going on. They pull her to the floor, they start CPR. And the moment she took that first breath, I was like, oh, I'm never going to feel this useless in an emergency ever again. I'm never going to do that. So the next week I enrolled in EMT school and I started doing that. And once I started doing that, I was like, I want to do more. Became a paramedic after that. And then once I became a paramedic, I realized I wanted to do more than that. It was really defeating to drop patients off at the door and not know how they end up, if they're set up for success at home. Obviously some of them we see again, but most times I just never knew how those people would shake out. And I wanted a step above that. I wanted to understand more of the pathology, what was going on, and also how to better help my patients. So I got my bachelor's degree in biology and then PA school. And now I'm here 14 years later.
So it's really cool that you have a personal connection with EMS, and kind of what drove you into that career path was seeing someone that you love having a medical emergency. When you treat patients as a PA, and even in your career as a paramedic, was there always that memory in the back of your mind to go, this is somebody's mom or sister, or was it really personalized? Was that patient really personalized to you?
Yeah. So that's something that I have kept with me forever. And I impart greatly with people that I train. I love to take students. So I have students all the time. And, you've been around the shop long enough, right? People will make a snide comment or whatever. And I'm like, hey, man, remember, that's somebody's brother. That's somebody's dad. That's somebody's cousin. Imagine somebody was saying that about your brother, your dad, your cousin. And, those really tough, code cases, right? Where I walk out of a room and almost always when we reach the end of a cardiac arrest of a code and we announce the time of death, we've ceased efforts, I force the room to take a moment to remember and recognize that this person is a human and has connections to the world that we don't know. And have everybody reflect, because it's so important that we keep that sense of humanity. It is so easy for us to become automated and become like the human version of AI, right? Where everything's just like a box that we're checking and we're moving down the road. One of the best attendings I ever worked with once used the phrase, well, we've been hired to push the meat, and doing X, Y, or Z pushes the meat faster. And I'm like, man, yeah, I understand the sentiment. Yeah, I'm like, I understand the sentiment.
Yeah.
He goes, and he further explained, he was like, that's how administration and admin feels, right? At that institution, that's one of my first job back in the Midwest, very toxic work environment, very hostile. And he was like, that's how admin feels. We have to do whatever they want to move these people along faster. And to them, they're pieces of meat. And we have to remember that they're not, that they're more than that. And so, yeah, that's absolutely something that's been in the back of my mind forever. And what keeps me going on the hardest days is like, there's a lot of days at work where you're like, I don't feel like I helped anybody. But
Yeah.
then you remember that, these people, it may not have been your emergency, but it was their emergency and you were there to see them through that. And I tell my wife all the time, like, the biggest part of my job that I like is I like to be the calm in everybody else's storm. Because in my storm, I couldn't do that. And my mother was dead in front of me and I couldn't do that. And I've dedicated over a decade now to making sure that other people don't feel like they needed to be the calm in that storm, right? So I often approach family after a bad call or a bad case and I'm like, hey, you did nothing wrong. You did everything you're supposed to do exactly how you're supposed to do it. Because I remember when that firefighter pulled me aside and said, she's all right. We got her breathing again. You did the right thing. You called 911, right? Because I had guilt forever.
Sure,
It was
sure.
it was horrible. And I then as a medic met that guy, that firefighter. I worked with him on a few calls and I was like, you probably don't remember this. And he was like, I do. He's like, 4 years ago, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, and look at you now. Thanks, man.
He catapulted your career and didn't even realize it.
Yeah. And it turns out he's actually a super good guy. We've stayed in touch over the years and he's just a great guy and a great medic and a great firefighter and incredibly thankful for that. And right now, there's so much hostility towards not just the medical field, but people in the medical field, right? Part of why I've toned down some of my content creation on work stuff, on emergency medicine work stuff, is I've now become this like face of the field. And so people who have had horrible experiences come into my comment section and are like, well, you're one in a million, X, Y, or Z is like this and it's not like this everywhere. And, I had this experience or I had this experience. And it just becomes me saying on repeat, I'm sorry you had that experience, but I promise we're not all like that. And it's really hard for you to keep saying like, I'm sorry you ran into the bad bunch of the apple, but like we're all pretty good apples. And so I've in recent months in the last year or so, I've really dialed it back unless I have the emotional bandwidth to be that space, because these people just want a space to vent and let us have it. And I get it. But some days I just don't have that bandwidth. So I have lately been posting mostly about, my journey being a new homeowner, which is just a whole other thing. But it's just, it's tough to have to be the face of the good people in medicine when there are so many of us and so many more of us than bad ones.
True. I think it's really interesting. And you brought up a great point when you were talking about how you approach the end of an arrest situation or the end of a code, as many people would know it. We actually had an in-depth discussion about this a few episodes ago, and I want to kind of get your take on it. And you kind of went into it just a little bit, but I want you to get deeper because I think there's more there. How often we in EMS, and I've been one of those, that lose our humanity for people. I think we get and we had an in-depth discussion about it. And I think it's the repetition. I think it is the clientele that sometimes we see. We typically get faced with, worst is not the right word, but some of the lower of what we think of as humanity.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we get burnout or whatever the case may be, but we tend to lose that humanity of remembering that as someone's loved one.
Yeah, it's a trap that I fell into when I was in EMS. So I was primarily in the Midwest, and I started working for a hospital system that I had been in EMS for as a PA. And it's the certain group of people. It's like, it's not to keep harping on weather analogies, but it's a perfect storm of you get the right crew, the right coworker, the right patient who you've known and seen several times and you thought you fixed the issue and you really set them up for success, and then you're seeing them again for the same thing. And let's be honest, it's mostly our mental health folks, our chronic pain and illness folks, and substance use folks. Like those are the ones that we're seeing repeatedly, right? And I caught myself. There was this patient we picked up dozens of times for, alcohol use, ETOH, intoxication, right? And the shift before, I had driven this individual to their set up appointment for rehab, detox, sat with them through part of the appointment, and I've actually never told the story, sat with them for a while and really, really was like, I believe in you. You're going to be okay. We're going to get this done. I don't want to pick you up again. And I don't think I'm going to have to. 3 days later, I'm at their house for an intox. They've fallen down a set of stairs. They're altered. And I'm just heartbroken. And I'm mad and I'm frustrated. And I think that they're altered because they're intoxicated, right? And because I'm a medic at this point. I haven't started, working as a PA, but I've been finishing up getting licensed and whatever else. And I'm like, God, this is so frustrating. And I let that pigeonhole me into thinking, this person was drunk and like I can be mad at this person for not taking the help that I handed them. We got to the hospital, they had a huge brain bleed and they were dead 6 days later. I actually took the transfer of that patient to somewhere else, a tertiary care center, and they ended up dying 6 days later. It was so easy in the moment for me to just be so mad at this person, just mad at this person for not taking the quote handout end quote that they were given and not doing the right things. And I had been on, a several day stretch and I was just, so tired and so irritated. And of course, when I showed up with this patient, I was like, yeah, intoxication, whatever. Of course, the first word out of the nurse's mouth was like, why didn't you drop him off outside? Like shit like that. Right. And it's like, it's so much easier to go with the grain. And when everyone around you is just shitting on this person, you're around the quote water cooler end quote, right? It's just easier to go with that. And it's harder to stand up and say like, no, I don't agree with that or whatever. And in this moment, I was mad. I was upset. And ultimately they died. And ever since then, I see countless bounce backs now. And every time I walk up with the same disposition of, hey man, how's it going? How are things today? You were sober last week. I'm sad to see you're not today. Part of recovery is falling off that journey. Part of that is just falling off that bandwagon. It's just part of the journey. You're here today. What's going on? And just remember that like they are sick in a way that I will never fully understand. It doesn't matter how many close friends I have that are sober or whatever, right? I'll never understand that personally. It's so easy to fall into that grain and be whisked down a river. And it takes such a jarring moment like that to pull you out of that and be like, you can't get mad at these people because at the end of the day, they're people, they're humans, they're flawed. What they do doesn't reflect on you. It felt like a personal failure when this person called back just a few days later for a fall and whatever else, right? Like that felt like a personal failure. Yeah. And I think a lot of us take it on personally. Like we take it as a reflection of our jobs. Like we're doing a bad job. This person feels the need to come back. This person continues to be a high utilizer. They continue to quote, abuse the system, end quote, right? Like, and it's not an us failure. We're doing all the right things. It becomes an us failure when we let that color our care, right? I wouldn't have done anything different for this person, altered mental status, intoxicated versus a brain bleed. Nothing changes on my end, nothing. But the way I felt and thought, I've never been more disgusted with myself later, right? Like just awful.
No,
and it's unfortunate that many of the people in our profession don't have that second thought of feeling bad or guilty or just unwell about that because they're like, well, no, that's their choice. They made that choice and whatever else, right? And it's a tough road for sure not to get frustrated and let yourself get pigeonholed when you're seeing these people. I mean, so often you have their birthday memorized, but you can't remember your second cousin's birthday, right? It's
absolutely right.
It's tough. It's tough for sure. And it's so easy for me to sit here and say, zoom out, right? Tell people to zoom out. But when you're in it and you've worked 6 days in a row, my old schedule used to be 6 days on, 8 days off. When I was on day 6, 24, and I was sleeping and I got woken up overnight to come see,
You're in a bad mood.
Yeah, because you just got done getting thrown up on, you just fell back asleep, and now you're up again for some absolute drunken shenanigans bullshit. You decided to light a firework off in your garage, and now I'm on a fire standby for 6.5 hours while the firefighters put out your garage. It's so easy to be so afraid. And I know everyone's like, yeah, it's so easy when you say it in the moment, just like take a step back, but so sincerely, just take the half a second to zoom out and be like, it's not that serious. This is not a reflection on you. Be here. Do the job. Everybody goes home safe, right? Like, that's what we want.
One of the more interesting guests that we've had on, you're probably familiar with him. Most people are. EMS Avenger was on one of our very first episodes. And he talked in depth about not necessarily this principle, but just the fact of being kind to people is so much easier. It makes your job so much better.
Yep.
Minute to minute if you just choose kindness. So what you talked about, the story you just shared about alcoholic, drunk, whatever you want to label it, and then having that happen. I think that we all have those kind of stories that we wear that burden of this is on me. And I think that carries a huge emotional cost. So when you look back at your whole career, paramedic, PA, what's the most significant cost of your job? What would you say that was?
Cost how? Like what I've given up, what I've lost in the career?
Well, emotional cost. What's it cost you? Like the heartstrings that are involved in this job are significant. So what's that for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's certain things that are more costly than others, right? When we talk about that kind of a cost, right? Like kids, a bad kid call stick with you forever. It doesn't matter if you have kids or not. It's just it's a different kind of thing. I was actually talking to a colleague about this the other day. The scream that a parent lets out when their kid goes is it's universal. It crosses languages, it crosses countries, it crosses everything. It's the same. And it's gut-wrenching, and it's guttural, and it's visceral, and you can feel it, and you'll never forget it.
I've always said if hell has a sound, that's it.
Well, for sure. It's awful every time, and those cases have the worst cost. I have been unlucky enough to have a few bad cases, those bad asthmatic kids that you go to where no matter what you do, you just can't get the air to move. And then they finally stop breathing altogether. And it doesn't matter that there's a tube down their throat. Their lungs have essentially just lost all elasticity. And they can look so good for so long and then they don't. And it's just awful. And those are the tough ones. And then, I've had a nickname a few months ago in the department. They were calling me the Grim Reaper because 3 shifts in a row had several surprise you have cancer conversations. And it's not ever fun. It's not ever easy. My ex's grandfather died from pancreatic cancer. And so I have a really, really soft spot when we find pancreatic cancer because it's almost always terminal. It's almost always bad. And it almost always sneaks up on people until it's too late to do anything about it. Like that's just how pancreatic cancer works. And I had a case a couple of months ago. I was taking care of this individual for feeling unwell. Get a belly scan, you have pancreatic cancer. Bounces back a week later, it's progressed. We're now not doing well. The family's lovely, of course, they always are, right?
Always.
And for the first time ever in my career, I got this person admitted for comfort care. I've done that lots. But for the first time ever, I went to the floor of our hospital. I have not been outside of our emergency department. Outside like the ED and the ICU. I've been here 4 years. ED, ICU, cafeteria. Right? Like that's my purview. I go up to the floor and I've got nursing staff looking at me and they're like, "Who are you?" I was like, "Hi, I'm Kristine. I work down in the ER." And they're like, "Oh, we see your name on notes all the time." I was like, "Yes." They're like, "Do you have family up here?" I was like, "No, I'm looking for this patient." And they're like, "Oh, great, yeah." I go in there and I visit with the family and I followed that individual and that family for the entire 4-day stay over a weekend. I visited every morning. And for the first time ever, I gave this individual my phone number, their family member my phone number. And I said, if you need anything, if you need help moving things, they were, elderly. I was like, if you need help moving things, if you need help planning things, if you need whatever, you let me know. By complete happenstance, 2 days later, their neighbor who had been there, who I had met, whatever, comes in for their own emergency. And on the way out of the triage room where I was with them, they said, "Oh, and by the way, they died." And I was just like, I was heartbroken about it. I didn't know this person. By the time I met this person, they were like, so altered. They weren't there, right? But this family member was telling me all about how lovely this person was. And I connected with that family member and I just so badly wanted to be there for that family and to help. And it like really restored my faith in humanity, how lovely these people were in dealing with this horrible thing. And those cases cost me a lot. I go home that night, I hug my wife extra. And I'm like, it's the older I get, the more I realize how heavy these kinds of things are. Terminal illness conversations, I have very honest conversations with my patients. I'll walk in and go, "Here's the thing, scan showed a mass. I don't know what that mass is. I don't know how bad it is. I don't know if it's no big deal. I have no idea. I can only present you with the facts that I have, and that's all I have right now." And being comfortable in that silence is so hard. Nobody teaches you how to do that, right? Nobody teaches you how to just sit there. Everyone's like, yeah, so then you just move on to the next case. You move on to the next call. And I'm like, no. Yeah. You have to sit in it. And you don't get to say anything to make yourself feel better. It's not about you. It's not about you. You sit there in complete silence. We just had a trauma arrest not too long ago. The attending was very busy. The department was slammed. I helped with the arrest. We called it. And I was like, "I'll handle the family." And they were like, "Are you sure?" I was like, yeah, I'll handle the family. And I went and got this young family, brought them in to see their loved one who had passed in a traumatic way. We tried to clean the patient up as best you could, but when it's trauma and you have, ME involvement, you can't remove tubes and stuff. For those of you that don't know, a medical examiner requires that all tubes and lines and everything stay in. So you can't remove that stuff to make them, quote, more presentable, end quote, to the family. And I stood in that room in silence as they sobbed and fell to the floor and everything else, because that was my job, right? My job is to be a source of information and the calm to that storm, right? Like that's my whole job. And being comfortable in silence is something that's like so hard to do. And that makes the emotional toll higher, right? Because now I can't say things to make myself feel better. Now I'm just piling it all on myself. And then you got to walk out of the room and go see your other 10 patients that you've had waiting forever. And then you look at your coworker and you're like, that sucked, right? Like, that was horrible. And then they're like, yeah, no, that was awful. Yeah. So anyway, bed 9. And I'm like, yeah, right. Bed 9 needs that thing that we talked about.
Yeah, but there's such a power in presence for people.
Yeah.
Like, being present for someone makes all the difference in the world. That's not just coming from somebody who's been in EMS for 20 years and done everything from leadership to dispatching. There is such a power in just being present for someone in that moment. That's coming from somebody who has lived trauma. There is, and I'll tell this story. My mother-in-law died in a motorcycle accident, a very traumatic way. The same kind of thing. We had to do all those things that you described. Just not a good situation. But there's a nurse in Springfield, Missouri right now that we are still friends with, that has come to multiple of my son's birthday parties, that she was just present. She didn't try to say anything. She didn't try to do anything. She was just there for us if we needed her. She just stood there. And there was such a power in that, and connected us to her in such a way that is unexplainable, just simply unexplainable.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing real humanity in real time. It's that moment where you connect with another human and you go, it's a silent conversation where your eyes just look at each other and you go, I could be you, right? And you could be me in the situation. A matter of happenstance and circumstance is what has put us in these positions. And people don't, it all sounds so corny, right? And you read it in a book or whatever, and people are like, this is ridiculous. This is a Netflix show. I'm like, you don't know it until you experience it. And it's the same thing with your coworkers. I've explained this with my wife about how eye contact for communication is so important to me, because in the department, if you need something, you're not shouting for it. Your eyes are up and you're looking around, and somebody that knows you sees those eyes and goes, what do you need? What can I find you? Right? Like, that kind of communication happens during emergencies. It happens during, all these moments. But one of the most special things is when it happens in a moment where that human just needed you to be there for them. And you just recognize that you two were just there, and time and space falls away. It's so bizarre, but you're just there in that moment in such a profound way. It's one of the better parts about my job, but it's exhausting. It makes a 10-hour day feel like a 30-hour day. I am exhausted after a tough day like that.
And people don't realize that concept.
No.
People say, well, you work 4 10-hour days or 3 12s or whatever you choose to work. And they're like, oh, that's not bad. You're only working 4 days. I'm like, you do not realize that 3 12-hour shifts can be absolute hell in a way that you didn't know that hell existed. Like that.
And
it can be a lot.
Right. And it's so different, right? Like, just the other day, I don't get fired by patients very often. I really don't. I pride myself on that. The soft skills, being kind, those are so important, and so much more than people think. They're like, oh, I have to know this diagnosis and this. And I'm like, no, you have to walk into a room and go, hey, homie, here's the thing. You don't want to get this scan. Here's why you need this scan. So we're going to do the scan. Okay. Like, let's do that in a way that the patient's like, yeah, you're right. We should do that. We should. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Or walk into a room and go, I get that you're pissed, dude. I'm mad too. I'd be mad and cursing with your patients, right? People are like, you should always be professional. And I'm like, if this guy is yelling at me in curse words, I'm going to walk in and go, I'm going to need you to sit the fuck down for a second and let's just talk it out. And almost always they're going to be like, all right, heard, I got you. Those soft skills are so important. And the other day I couldn't soft skill my way out of it. This individual hated my guts, fired me. Fine. That's your right. You can do that. That's fine. But the fallout from that firing took so much mental work. It was harder for me to have to document that interaction, speak to my leadership, speak to the attending on, right? Do all that stuff than running 4 back-to-back codes. I would rather drop a central line, leave the room, drop a chest tube, leave the room, intubate somebody, than do some of this other harder, mentally taxing stuff. I mean, it's a different level of exhaustion. My physical body feels okay, but my brain literally can't do anything. Yeah. I once came home when we were planning our wedding, and my wife looks at me and was like, hi, I need you to pick out of these things. And I said, I couldn't make a decision right now if you were holding a gun to my head. My brain physically can't do it. I need you to do it. And it happens all the time with like dinner. I'm like, I don't care. It can be anything. Is it edible? I'll take it. Because my brain just loses that ability. But I can go for a run and I can lift, all night and I'm fine. But the mental exhaustion is just so different.
So I'm a leader at a large healthcare organization. And one of the things that my friends constantly give me grief about is like, I mean, you're just whipped. You don't make any decisions at home. Like, you just kind of, and
that sounds lovely.
I was like, my wife knows that when I'm done with a day, like, I am decision fatigued. Like, it's over.
Yep.
And she does that for me, not to me.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see other friends that don't know the world that we have kind of lived in, and not just in leadership, but it's the same with, if you run 6 back-to-back traumatic calls or bad calls, medically complex calls, there's so much decision making that goes minute by minute in the back of an ambulance or in a ER or wherever you are. It's tough, and you do get decision fatigue, and you do get the day-to-day burnout, not the big burnout that's really a main stage topic right now, but the day-to-day, like, I'm just tired. I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful for my EMS background, and I'm so thankful I've kept all my licensure and stuff. And one day I might get back in the truck. I don't know. But I try and give EMS in our area so much grace. So we are not a trauma center. We aren't. And that means you got to be careful what trauma you bring us, right? And so when you roll in with a dude with a motor vehicle accident, let's say a motorcycle accident, just happened the other day, a motorcycle accident, complaining of belly and rib pain, it's a BLS call, and you brought that person to a non-trauma center, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to go, hey man, what was the thought here? Like what was your justification in your noodle as to why you brought this trauma patient who would be a trauma alert at any trauma center to a non-trauma center? And almost always the first words out of their mouth is, they look okay. And I'm like, heard, I get it. So did Princess Diana. Just going to throw that out there. And normally that gets a laugh out of them, right? And then they're like, yeah, I see what you're saying. And I'm like, yeah. Also, how close is this to your station? And they're like, closer than the trauma center. And I'm like, and is that some of that there? I'm like, are you coming on the end of a shift, right? And then they're like, yeah. And I'm like, here's the thing, man. I get it. We fall into an easier thing to do because, it's the easier decision. It's the path of least resistance. It's easier for me. I'd rather take a slap on the wrist from the receiving facility than go out of my way, potentially catch a late call, potentially stay, be held over 12 hours or whatever. The EMS out here has some weird holdover rules. Like, I don't understand it, and I would never agree to it. I'm like, y'all are crazy. And so I get it. But remember, the best thing for this patient isn't this, right? And you work to live, not live to work. And I get that. But your job is for the patient, right? And so now if this person does have something, if I go in that room and I find something, I'm going to have to call you right back to transfer them down the road anyway, right? Like, we're going to have to do that. So I try to remind them of their day-to-day decision fatigue with that, just transport decisions. And I don't like IV versus no IV. I will never understand the disaster that is communication between the hospital and EMS about whether or not you got an IV. Homie, I don't care if you have access or not. Get here. Are they breathing? Like, why is that such a fight that we have to have? So I never come up to EMS and I'm like, why didn't you put a line in? I don't care. We'll do that. We'll take care of it. That's fine. But the transport decision, I'm like, I know this is coming from a place of you're tired. You want to do the easier thing. And our trauma center right now has them holding the wall for several hours and nobody wants to do that. And I know that. I know. But we got to do what's best for the patient, right? And that day-to-day fatigue and that day-to-day burnout catches up with people. I would love to get one of those little counter thingies and start counting how many decisions throughout a PA shift I make. Because it's like, I bet in the first 10 minutes I'm there, I've made 30 decisions about what I'm ordering for patients, what they're getting as far as treatment goes. And then because I'm, quote, approachable, end quote, I will get questions on other people's patients if they're busy or, maybe one of our less approachable people. And so I'm making decisions for everybody in the department. 30 lives are in my hands when I walk through those doors.
Right.
So when I get home, I'm like, if you ask me if I want pesto or garlic, I don't care. Just pick. That's fine.
Pick one. That's right.
That's fine. Just pick one.
So I remember the very first time I saw your videos, and I don't even think that it was anything to do with EMS. I think you were saying something about being a PA or going to PA school.
Yeah.
And I immediately said to myself, this is an EMS girl. So I went and looked at your page and I was like, yep, nailed it. So how'd you make the transition? What in your head said, I think I want to be a PA? Was it the money part of it, or was it you looking for something else within medicine to get out of EMS?
So it's funny you say that. I get a lot of people ask me if I'm military, and I'm like, nope, not military, because I use the phrase squared away, hang tight, those kinds of things. And they're like, military? No.
I would have not guessed that.
Well, and then I've had others, police, and I'm like, no. And then people that are in EMS are like, you're a medic somewhere, aren't you? And I was like, used to be, yeah. And they're like, okay, yeah, no, that makes more sense.
That fits, yeah.
No, I was from 19 to 22 was full-time on the truck. And there was several instances where I got hurt, whether it was lifting somebody from, wedged in between a toilet and a bathtub, that like disaster of a patient move. And I felt myself becoming physically less able. I mean, and I saw all my like good friends, coworkers who were like, yeah, I go to a chiro 6 days a week because my back is so shot. I get injections. I'm having a back surgery. Like just the physical demand on the body. I was switching between days and nights. And so my sleep schedule was just like wrecked. And I'm about to shock America here. When I graduated as an associate's degree holding paramedic with my national, which at the time is important because not everywhere required your national, and I was practicing in Illinois and in Iowa, and you could do either way. You could do a state license or you could get your national for both of those states. And many of my coworkers only got the state license, and I got my national, so you got like a little bit of a pay bump for that. With all of that, I was making $14.50 an hour. So $14.50 at 19 years old to be in charge of saving a life. So I show up to a home, we're doing CPR, I'm putting a tube down somebody's throat, and I'm being paid $14.50. And oh, by the way, I can't rent a car. Like just the insanity that was. And I came from working at FedEx where I was making close to that. And then, went through all this other schooling and whatever else. So the money was definitely part of it. I was like, there has to be a way to earn a little bit better of a living. And of course, I did the typical EMS thing where I was like, I'll just work all the overtime in the world. And so I just was grinding it out. I was working so much.
And that's always such a horrible decision.
Oh, yeah. No,
and then it always ends up being bad life choices.
Yeah, you hate everybody, you hate yourself, then you start hating the job, you start hating, everything. And where I worked, we had like dynamic posting. So I was, in the truck at a gas station in the middle of nowhere for our coverage area for several hours. And I'm like, my legs are miserable at this point. But I was having several moments of really critical cases where I would drop them off and then I'd have no idea what happened after. And my mom, the incident that got me in EMS, right, she actually had an overdose. It was a suicide attempt. She went through, menopause, and that shifted her brain chemistry, for lack of a better term, like a true major depressive disorder, eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I saw how hard it was for her to get any care past that initial EMS visit. I mean, it was just the follow-up care on the outpatient side, just any version of anything past just that initial drop-off it was so hard to get the care that they needed, that she needed. And I said, I really want to be a part of the system that does the next step, right? Like it just felt like I was almost doing my patients a disservice, dropping them off the door and then saying, see ya. And so I had a good friend of mine, a regular partner of mine who was getting his bachelor's in biology and was pre-PA. And I talked a lot with him and he was like, I think PA is going to be the move for you. Because I also didn't want to go to med school and lose a decade of my life. I mean, and so much student debt, to be able to do what I want to do and pigeonhole myself into one specialty, which is what, med school would do. I wanted the option of, I'm going to go to the ER for a few years. And then if I want to go into something else for family or whatever else, I could. And so PA school was that. And then once I got into it and started learning so much on a deeper level, I was like, oh yeah, no, like this is the best move for me. And the fact that I can now at work, I walk in, right, I drop a chest tube and then I look at the attending and I'm like, and this is your problem. And then I leave. Right? Because I still have that freedom of being like, and I'm not the doctor, bye. Or I keep the patient and I'm like, nope, this is my patient. I'm the primary. And I'm lucky where I work that they're like, yeah, this is all you do. You need me? I'm here. Like if you need anything, I'm right on the corner, but otherwise this is all you. And that flexibility of deferring to somebody higher up the chain of command is so nice. It's like such a nice safety net to have. Yeah, that's how I ended up transitioning to being a PA. And I love it. I have zero regrets. I miss the truck every day, but now I make X what I made as a medic. If I were to take, if I were to take, that kind of a pay cut, and I'm like, it's better in New England. EMS is paid better in New England, but I don't know, man. I don't know that you could pay me enough to go back into a house to dig somebody out of a crevice and potentially wreck my back. I had so many close calls. It was so scary. I was like, I want my physical health past 21. And it felt like I was going to lose that if I stayed on the truck.
I'm really going to blow your mind. When I started in 2007, I started in the Mississippi Delta, which is a pretty rough area. Gang violence, poverty leads to more violence. It's just the constant go back around the circle of life over and over and over. And when I started as an EMT, I was making $6.15 an hour. And then when I got my medic, it was $12.75. And I thought I was making bank at $12.75.
Oh, God.
But it's just like, what are you doing, man? I mean, I had the same thoughts. I was like, what are you doing? So
It
I
just
went
felt
on to
so
get my
disproportionate.
education. Yeah, it does. It does because literally I have had gunshots fly over my head. I have been
Yeah.
shot at, and it's like I can remember rolling under the ambulance during that. And my partner, who is kind of a comedy guy more so than anything else, he said, "You're making 615 for this." And I was like,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
is
God.
awful.
This is awful.
This is awful. Now, I love the EMS and I still do for what it is. And I do still miss the truck. But yeah, I just don't think, for one, I'm one of those that my back's wrecked. So I don't think I could go
Yep.
back if I wanted to.
Yep.
I would have more injury than time at work. So, but anyway, how'd you go from, because PA is a little bit different than EMS. So PA is, like you mentioned, 10 patients. How'd you go from having a rapid fire, one patient at a time, one critical patient to, like you said, potentially having 3 out of those 10 patients be critical and you're still having to do for room 9?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been, I'm so thankful I was in EMS because you have to multitask so much, right? So I was fortunate enough, I was involved in some smaller scale like mass casualty stuff. So you show up and you're doing like rapid fire triage and you're like moving all around doing all these things. With a one critical patient in the back of the truck, right? I'm starting the line. I'm looking at the 12 lead. I'm drawing up meds. I'm getting, maybe CPAP on, maybe I'm getting ready to intubate. It's that same skill, except now I have 11 more arms, right? Because now I've got a team of people around me. So what's great is now I can be in this critical case in, let's say bed 2, and I look at one of the nurses that's walking by to help me out, and I'm like, "Hi, I need you to walk by bed 4. Can you make sure that they're still breathing, that they're okay?" Like that kind of stuff, right? So it's so much easier. You're using your brain in a different way. You're managing several things. You're spinning several plates. But my coworkers who have not done EMS struggle much harder with that than what I do, because I'm like, no. You're constantly shifting a priority list, right? So like, do I have the airway in bed 2? I'm working on that. Bed 4 is still doing okay. And bed 5 has stuff that can wait. And bed 6 has stuff that can wait, right? They're here for belly pain, stable stuff, right? Very rarely does a truly sick case have to pull me totally out of rotation to do all the other stuff for my other cases. And I'm very fortunate. Everywhere that I work, if somebody knows you're in a critical case and somebody else comes looking for something, they'll be the first ones to raise their hand and be like, "What do you need? This person's doing X, Y, or Z. How can I help?" It's just so nice to have a support structure, because my first PA job, you didn't really have that. It was not a supportive environment. It was, you got left high and dry, and if that's your problem, it's your problem. And if that gets sent to litigation or peer review, the person that was there with you is going to be like, "That wasn't my problem. Not my circus, not my monkeys." And it's the opposite everywhere I work now. All 3 of my jobs now, if there's something like that were to happen, they'd be like, "No, I was there that day, and this is how things went down in like the X, Y, or Z," right? But having a team outside of just you and your partner, because it's so isolating in EMS. You have you and your partner and your engine, whatever fire company if you have a fire company that shows up, can be rock stars or the worst people you've ever met, right? Like there is not a lot of in between. You either have a crew that's going to roll with you and give you extra hands, or you have a crew that's like, "All right, cool, I'm going back to the firehouse, see ya." Right? Like it's just so variable. And so now having all these sick patients or even not sick patients, having that team is so, so helpful. You don't realize how alone you are in the truck until you realize what it's like not to be alone in that truck.
So we talked about decision fatigue. What about compassion fatigue? I feel like we suffer from this. I feel like it's just a natural occurrence that, we are constantly having to give our compassion away, whether genuine or put on. Many people have to put it on. I was never one of those. I was always kind of genuinely compassionate. But at the end of the day, that's tiring too.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit earlier with the high utilizers, right? Like it's so easy to walk in and be like, "Hey dude, you're here again. What do you need? Why are you doing this to me? It's already a hard day. Why are you yelling? Why are you putting up a fight, doing all this other stuff?" It happens, and it happens to all of us. And it's not something I'm going to sit here and pretend that I'm, excellent at. There are bad days where I'm like, I can't today. I just can't. And there's been days where I'll walk up to my colleague and there's somebody on the board to be seen who I'm familiar with. And I'll look at them and be like, "I need you to take that one. I'll take the next one, but I can't do it today. I can't. I just can't. I need you to take that one." And 99% of the time, they're like, "Yeah, great." Sometimes they're like, and then it becomes all right, I'll do it. And like have to go in there. And I'll walk in with a defeated look on my face and be like, "Hey, I'm having kind of a rough day. What's going on? What is this going to go okay today? Like, can this just go okay today?" You don't have it in you. And other days you're putting on more compassion, or you're using more of your compassion to kind of buffer your colleagues who really don't have it, right? There's some days that I'm following a certain coworker of mine into each room and being like, they aren't having a great day. How can I help you? What can I do to help? Just because we have a little bit more bandwidth that day. It's just so day dependent and so patient dependent and so situational, right? I struggle to have compassion for somebody complaining about the wait time when they can see us across the hall doing CPR.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's maybe not the best move, but when I'm in triage, if somebody comes up and they're like, I've been waiting for 4 hours, I'm like, would you like a tour of the department where I can show you that we're practicing folding chair medicine right now because we have no beds and it's standing room only? I will happily show you that I am not gatekeeping some heaven or paradise behind these two big doors.
Right.
I'll show you what we're dealing with. I've no shame in that. And a lot of times they back down and they're like, I'm sorry. I'm like, I understand that you're frustrated about the wait. It's a long wait. But the good news is all your stuff that's come back so far looks pretty good. And if I can get you out from up here, I will. But I can't right now. But I'll happily.
I would much rather be in the waiting room than in trauma room 1.
Right. And a lot of times these people are pretty okay with it. But every now and then they'll be like, well, my emergency is an emergency too. And I'm like, because it's an emergency to you does not mean that it's a life-threatening thing. And that's kind of what our job is, to figure out. And do we get it wrong sometimes? Yeah. Triage is an imperfect system. It really is.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times we're pretty on the nose. And my compassion fatigue is high with those folks who don't understand that they're waiting for a reason.
Now, did you ever deal with, through your ambulance career, your PA career so far, have you dealt with the PTSD or the burnout? You kind of touched on a few situations that kind of could be categorized as like carrying some of that with you, and we discussed that. But did you ever have a time when you were like, I legitimately need help?
Yeah. So COVID in the Midwest was really hard. We were bagging patients in hallways. We were having serious conversations about who gets the next vent. We were sending patients 6+ hours away. We were just some next level shit. And you're doing that with a mask that's so tight to your face, you're cutting into your skin, right? And you're being told from the people that you trust most that we don't know what this is and we don't know what's going to happen. And I got through that, I thought pretty okay. And then I started working as a PA and I realized like, I've got maybe a little bit more of that baggage than I thought. I was like, I was nervous to intubate for a while because we were intubating people and they were dying because you put these COVID cases on tubes and they didn't do well. And so I, for a while, was gun shy. I was like, man, should we be intubating? Should we be taking this person's airway away? Is that a good idea? Are we sure that they don't have COVID? Are we sure this is like just kind of that stuff? And I realized that I was letting a lot of that affect my practice to the point, I thankfully had a therapist and was working through that with my therapist. It's like, hey, how do I, start to right size things? And it took a lot. It took a long time for me to kind of unlearn the trauma that was the pandemic. There's some moments that are a little triggering for me even now. A little activating is the phrase we should be using, where we'll get an email about like a short supply of something that we have. And I'm like, oh my God, are we going back? Am I going back to wearing trash bags? Yeah. What are we doing? Yeah. And I think I'm a little predisposed to a trauma memory like that because very recently, this is an aside, very recently we went through a cockroach infestation. So we moved out of our apartment into our house because our apartment got invaded by cockroaches from a neighbor. And now, dude, it was a mess. It was a disaster, horrible. German cockroaches, they only infest human dwellings. They're a nightmare to get rid of. They're very hard to get rid of, whatever. And now in the new house, I see a bug and my heart rate is like 160. It's like the world slows down. And I'm like dialed in to figuring out. It's like I'm trying to do a surgical airway or something. I'm like so hyper focused about what my next step is. Like my breath slows down. It's like the Matrix. And I discover it's not a cockroach. I'm not worried about it. And it's a different bug or whatever. But it's like that moment where I'm like, oh yeah, like I have a little bit of trauma with that. And there's some moments at work that are like that for me still, that are like, the kid breathing cases are tough. And because I had that really bad asthmatic kid. And so now every time I have an asthmatic kid come in, I'm like, the world stops. I just I'm teleported back to that moment. And then I have to like breathe and use my coping skills. And I had a bad airway the other day. It was not going. And everybody was so nice and being really patient with me. And I'm like trying to advance the tube. It's not working. And in that, for the first time probably ever, in that moment, I was able to go, Kristine, just breathe. Like in my own brain, I was like, nobody's worried about how fast or how slow you're going right now except you. So just like, take a second. Yep. Yeah. And then I got it. And then I walked out of the room and I was like, I'm really proud of myself. That's called growth. We're growing.
That's called growth. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
But I completely resonate with what you're saying about the asthma patient. The first time Because when I had a pediatric drowning in
Ugh.
2017 that just wrecked me, and I've shared it multiple times on the
Yeah.
show, but it was just one of those things that threw me completely off the rails, and I was scared the whole time. I had this inner fear that I couldn't explain. So what do I do because I don't like to be scared of anything? I went and got a job as a pediatric critical care paramedic
Yeah. Yep.
because I was like, I'm going to face this head on and we're just going to do it. And the first time I saw an asthma patient that a hospital had mismanaged and we were having to manually exhale for this patient, we were
Oh,
having to literally sit on his ribs and make him exhale. And he did not have a good outcome. He wound up not making it. But it was one of those that you didn't realize that the trauma was in there. You didn't realize what that did to your brain. But then the next asthma patient I had, I was like, oh God, do I need to
yeah.
manual exhale? And it wasn't even a bad asthma patient. It was just that presentation
Yeah.
of what was beginning to happen down that asthma pathway that I was just like super nervous about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I've had a therapist for years too. And I was like, well, that's going on the list to talk to about, with her on Wednesday for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And it affects your practice. So like you'll meet a million, like especially PAs and docs in the trade that are like, oh no, I had a patient one time that looked like this and was like this. So now I get this
Mhm.
test every time. Like I had a guy go into torsades after a completely negative cardiac workup. He went into torsades. And so now I'm
Really?
I'm obsessed with QTC. Every single patient that
Yeah.
I get an EKG on, I'm staring at that QTC. And if it's just if it's even a quarter of an inch over what I want it to be, they're getting mag. They're getting magnesium. I don't care. I don't care. Because I had it happen once and I'm never going to let it happen again. And I had, a D-dimer test that you get for, a blood clot. I had one be negative and this individual had a giant pulmonary embolism, had a giant blood clot. And so now I'm like, that test is garbage. I'm never trusting that test again. And it's just like, it really colors your practice because
Yeah,
you
it
so
does.
badly just don't want to feel that way again. Like, oh, I missed something or, oh, this was just a bad thing. And yeah, those asthma kid. And so now everybody, every time, and
Mhm.
where I work at has really significant asthmatics in that part of the state, the worst ones I've ever seen. And so of course I'm like, oh God, yeah, no, yep, let's get you
Mhm. Mhm.
squared away immediately. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah,
But yeah,
but that's the way our brains are wired.
yeah,
One of my favorite authors, Bryn Brown, which is a leadership author, but at the same time, she just has a lot of great stuff in her books. And she tells a story about her daughter coming home from I think it was fourth or fifth grade, very young child. And she had told her friends a secret. And her friends did what, little girls do, and they go and tell all the secrets to everybody else.
right.
And she came home crying to her mom. She said, I'll never trust anybody else again. But that's the way our brains are wired up. When something bad happens to us and we have a negative feeling, we're going to say, well, I'm never going to do that again, or I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I don't have to harbor that feeling again.
Yeah.
So I don't have to carry that load again. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. So is there anything that, other than therapy, was there anything that you found helpful on a day to day? I know you said you had growth. You took that breath, which is obviously something that either therapy taught you or you taught yourself, but excellent practice.
Yeah.
I have to do the same thing almost daily. But is there any blueprint that you have for dealing with those traumatic situations that you go through every time without fail?
Yeah. So zooming out, right? Like that's my catchphrase of 2025 has been to just zoom out, just really back up and I almost float above myself and look at the situation. And I'm like, just take a second, zoom out. What's going on? Why are you so enthralled in your brain and just like trapped in this? Our brain has these really cool sulci, right? These grooves. And I just imagine myself stuck in one of those. And I'm like, what are you doing? Send yourself a helicopter rope, right? Zoom out. Pull your mind's eye out of that sulci and look at the whole thing and really visualizing myself in my brain trapped in a thing and then quite literally just picking myself out of it helps a lot. I get out of that track. I joke a lot about visualization, but I'll put that issue on a box. I'll put that box on a shelf, and that shelf I will visit again, but not right now and not today, not in this moment. But I tell myself you're going to come back to that. Remember that feeling, you'll come back to that feeling. But right now you can't do that, right? We need to do this here. And the actual physical imagining of yourself and removing yourself from that groove helps me a lot. And it's helped me a lot with, this may not come as a surprise to people that know me, but anger. I was pretty quick to anger before I got diagnosed with ADHD and started on a stimulant medication. And my primary symptom was 0 to 100. So angry, outburst, horrible. But now, I'm medicated and that's gotten a lot better. But one of the other things that's helped a lot is I will feel myself go from, I hold everything right here, right? Like right in my sternum, and I'll feel it start to go into my throat. Like whatever it is, whatever's going to piss me off, the fact that I want to just like shout back, I can feel it coming up. And then I literally look at myself and I'm thinking in my brain, I'm like, Kristine, stop, pull it out of your throat and throw it on the ground. And I will like imagine myself doing that. And then I'll swallow hard and I'll take a deep breath and I'll be like, okay, so I want to yell in this moment. I just need everybody to know that I want to yell, but I'm not going to do that. But here's why I'm upset. And I feel like just the physical, me thinking about removing it like a physical ailment, like I'm pulling a splinter out, has really helped me be able to do that in the moment for sure. And then outside of the moment, to just like stay mentally healthy. I'm doing a lot of like physical fitness now. I'm into jujitsu 4 days a week. I'm running now, which is a new thing for me. I'm like lifting. It sounds stupid, but staying physically active has been such a game changer for my mental health. Like such a game changer for my mental health. It was really bad. And now I'm like doing pretty okay. I went and did that kids camp for kids with CMTA called Camp Footprint. I did it in June and I was outside every day for 7 days and I felt so good and I didn't realize how good I felt. Then I got home and I crashed, like the worst depression I've ever been in. And I was like, wow, like physical fitness matters. And I'm like, I'm not an athlete at all. But like just doing like the Just Run app where I'm like doing a run for 30 minutes, my whole day is totally different. I feel better. I look better. I've had people at work be like, you look like a whole new human. Like you look like you're the healthiest I've ever seen you. And my mental health is so much better. And now I just like, I can't emphasize enough how important like exercise has been to the whole picture. And I'm eating better, right? Like I've cut fast food out and whatever else, but I'm still drinking caffeine. I'm still slamming Red Bulls like there's nobody's business, right? But, you know, you cut out some of the heavier stuff and the difference it's made. Like it's just, I never ever believed anybody that ever told me it was going to make such a difference. And then I started doing it and was like, oh yeah, no, this has saved my sanity.
That and sleep.
Yeah, God,
makes
sleep.
Such a huge difference. Yeah. So at the end of the show, this is kind of the wrap up. Our goal is always somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes. Those episodes seem to perform well in the terms of having people listen to the whole episode. But give us if you had one chance to tell everybody something that if you hear one thing out of this podcast, what is it from Kristine?
It's not that serious. Just isn't. Whatever you're freaking out about in that moment, zoom out. It's not that serious. Just take it moment by moment, breath by breath. It's going to be fine.
I love that. So tell us where we can find Kristine at. Tell us where we can see all your stuff and get anything related to you.
Only active on TikTok anymore at Kristine Kapow, Kristine Kapow. I do have an Instagram, but I mostly just use that to talk about how obsessed I am with my wife because it's the only social media that she uses is Instagram. And when TikTok goes, I don't know where I'll be. I have a YouTube page up. It's around, but I haven't gotten around to really curating it just yet. But that's where I'm at for now. It's mostly homeowner content. I'm undergoing a lot homeowner projects right now. I have a series called Bevy in a Project, where I drink a beverage and tell you all about my project, whether it's failed or succeeded. And people seem to be enjoying my basement moisture journey.
Yeah, that's
where I'm at now.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
Well, Kristine, thank you so much for joining us. I think this has been an awesome conversation. I've been a fan of yours for some years now. So thank you for all the content you've posted, even the Bevy and a project. I love that. I'm one of the ones that watches all of those because I, as well, have had my share of home troubles. So I'm always watching somebody else's turmoil just like mine. So thanks for that encouragement. I do appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you being so open and honest about things. And if you guys listen, want to find a Silent War Within anywhere, you can find us Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. We also post our episodes on YouTube. Where you can watch the video of it. Spotify is now also video, so we're super excited about that. And then Apple Podcast also carries our podcast as well. So if you want to listen to us, connect with us, you certainly can. SilentWarWithin.com is still going strong. You guys have really engaged that, and I appreciate that. And if there's anything we can ever help you with, that's what we want to be here for. We want to be a safe place for first responders and healthcare to land and have a voice and to have someone that will openly listen to them. So if you ever need us, we're here for you. And as always, as we end the show, be safe, take care of your mind, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Kristine.
Thanks for having me, bud.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.